It's time for us to dive a little bit deeper into class design. Now, we've already kind of explored object-oriented design, what it's there for, how to use it, but there's some other topics that we need to dive into, and one of them is subclasses. So, um, generally, classes in Java exist kind of in a hierarchy where um, yes, you have sometimes a standalone class, but other times you have a class that's a parent class and it has child classes. It has children. And what do children do? They inherit the the attributes and behaviors of their parents. So they inherit all of these variables and all of the methods from the parent class. Um, Now, why would we want to do this? Why wouldn't we just start from scratch? Well, one benefit is you don't have to repeat yourself, where, if you've got all of these classes that they all have a lot of these attributes in common, it doesn't really make sense to start completely from scratch sometimes. Um, Same thing with behaviors. Like if they all kind of do the same things, then it's kind of silly to copy and paste that method into each class, especially if later on you wind up changing that method. Um, so again, repeating yourself when you're writing code is always kind of frowned upon for a lot of different reasons. Um, So, extending class functionality while not breaking old code. Basically, the idea behind this is, let's say, you have, a particular class, and you've written all of this code, and it's all having to do with this one class. And then later, you decide, oh man, I want to add some extra functionality for certain objects here. Well, what you can do is you can make a subclass of that, and you basically say, if it's this type of object, it has all of the functionality here, plus some extra functionality in these particular cases. And it'll still have all of the original functionality, but it'll have extra functionality. So your subclass objects, your child objects, will always have at least as much functionality as your original objects. They just have a little extra. There's extra things they can potentially do. There's also a big principle of object-oriented design called polymorphism. And the idea behind polymorphism is you have an action, but different objects achieve this action in a different way. So the stereotypical example that we use is like animals, where so let's say we have an animal class, and then as subclasses we have like dog and cat and cow. Well, I might say, object dot speak, and I can in my various classes, I can say, oh, in the dog class, when I say speak, I mean bark. When the cat class, I mean meow. If I'm in the cow class, I mean moo. And then what happens later is, if I've got a list full of animal objects, and I say speak, well, I don't have to like do a bunch of if statements, like if it's a cow, do this, if it's a whatever, because all that's already built in. So as I loop through, I just say, hey, speak, speak, speak. And Java goes, oh, it's a dog, so I'm calling the speak from the dog class. And it allows us to kind of have this intuitive functionality there. All right, so how do we make a subclass? Well, there's basically two big things that you need to do. The first is in the class header. So normally I would just say public class, whatever the name of my class is, but we're going to add this extends blank. Okay, if you have it extending a class, now it is a child of that class. The second thing you need to do is when you construct that that child object, you also have to construct a parent. And you do that by calling one of the constructors from the parent class. And the way you call that constructor is instead of using whatever the name of the parent class is, you call super. And it's referring to the superclass, the class above it. So what this does is as you construct one of these, um, you're, um, you're also constructing a parent class object at the same time. You're going to see why that's important later. But basically what this does is it guarantees that all of your variables from the parent class get initialized. Now, what you can do as well, so this is basically all that's required to do, is you have to construct it, and you have to say that you're extending it. Um, but in addition, you'll add additional variables. Okay, so any unique variables that you need to add for this subclass, and then any unique methods for the subclass. You'll want to add those here. Now, one of the nice things here, and we've kind of already talked about this, is that you can override a method from the parent class. Now, basically what's going on here is you have, just in general, this type of object has this certain behavior. Well, if you want, you can have your child class object do something different whenever that method is called. Now, the way that you do that is overriding. Now, overriding is kind of like overloading because it has the same name. But remember, with overloading, we had a different signature. So Java went, oh, you want to do this method because you're using this signature. Well, overriding, you use the exact same signature. Well, how does it know which one to do then, whether to do it from the parent class or the other? What Java's going to do is it's always going to pick the most local one. So it's going to assume, oh, well, if it's a dog, I'm not going to do the speak from the animal. I'm going to do the speak from the dog class if there is one there. Now, if there's not one there, it'll go ahead and do the parent class one. But if you override it, it's going to pick the most local one to use. All right, real quick, I want to talk about the protected privacy modifier. This may seem counterintuitive at first, but if you have a private variable in your parent class, even though your child class inherits it, it's still private. It still can't access those variables unless there's a getter. So even though it has those attributes, if you don't have a getter, you don't have access to those. Now there's two ways around this. One is you can make it public. Generally, we don't like to do that, but if you make it protected, then any subclasses are going to be able to access those variables without getters and setters. Okay. Methods usually aren't a problem because they're usually public. All right, this bit is a little confusing,